The crew of the Milano returns to face old friends and new foes, and groove to an all-new mixtape when Johnny Torch reviews Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Now, as I'm always wont to do, I'll set the stage by saying I wasn't the biggest fan of the original Guardians of the Galaxy. That's not to say I didn't enjoy it. I liked it a lot, and I gave it 4 stars, a B, which is well above average. I still think it's very rewatchable, but I don't have it in my top 5 Marvel movies as a lot of people have it, so I didn't really have the first film on a pedestal by any means going forward. The first film was refreshing as a mildly profane sci-fi comedy. This film is much more a mixed bag. When things work, it's a joy to behold. When it doesn't work, it's kinda lousy. The first film was pretty consistent. Consistently funny, consistently exciting, and with a dash of heartfelt drama. This film, some of the jokes are pretty bad, and some of the action in the last act sorta meandered around to a muddled mess. Kind of like Age of Ultron's last act. I don't think this film is very appropriate for kids, and I'm sure some of you are thinking, who cares? But the film was for the most part marketed with Baby Groot and Rocket Raccoon as the draw, making it seemingly family-friendly. A lot of the humor was much more raunchy than before. The first film had its share of raunchy humor, of course, but it was significantly more subtle in its approach. Part of the film's problem is that after the first 30 minutes or so, the film takes a pretty dark turn. Now, I remember in the first film I said the beginning was surprisingly dark, opening the film with Peter's mom dying of brain cancer when he was a little boy. That was hardly what I was expecting from a film about a funny talking raccoon. But this film gets very dark at points, and that was even more jarring than the first film. You have Yondu revealing he was sold into slavery by his parents, and how Sylvester Stallone makes him an outcast of the Ravengers because of his child trafficking. Nebula reveals Thanos basically took her apart piece by piece as a child, as she was inferior to Gamora, making her the wreck that she is today. Peter's dad, Ego, turns out to only want Peter as a means to an end, and was actually, not surprisingly, responsible for his mother's death, causing Peter to attempt to kill his own father. And then there's some overly mean-spirited stuff with the Ravengers turning on Yondu and gleefully sending half the crew to their deaths into the vacuum of space, and Baby Groot being mistreated by the same pirates, not unlike Disney's Quasimodo. With all that at play, it makes the film a whole lot harder to take than the first, which was more a simple light-hearted romp about a band of misfits learning to become a family. Now, some may say that's basically what Empire Strikes Back did, taking a darker turn in the sequel, but A New Hope wasn't a comedy. And at its core, the original Guardians of the Galaxy was a comedy, and this kind of shift was more than noticeable. Now, lest it appear like I'm hating on the film, I'll focus more now on some of the positives. The opening was probably my favorite scene. It was the closest extension to the original film, seeing the whole crew in action while Baby Groot dances to Mr. Blue Sky by ELO. That was probably the best song in the film. I was disappointed that Hooked on a Feeling wasn't in the film. I guess they didn't want to repeat any of the songs from the first mixtape. This is Volume 2 after all. Speaking of the music, I'd have to say that the music of the first film has a slight edge here, but we're talking about 70s AM schlock for the most part. I think the music here was much more directly tied to the story than the first, particularly with the songs Brandy and Fleetwood Mac's The Chain. A lot of people seem to criticize the Sovereign, but I more or less enjoyed their stiff upper-crust nobility here as antagonists. They really serve to keep the often unwieldy plot going forward. Kurt Russell gives a good performance here as Ego. He seems enigmatic enough that you can see why Peter seems to take a shine to him with little provocation. As for the heroes, Peter and Gamora's romance really doesn't have any heat. I mean, they seem to want to set it as a type of classic 80s will they won't they motif, a la Cheers or Moonlighting, but it never really gets quite there. Chris Pratt was my favorite part of the first film, and he gets to pay service to some of the 80s things that I also loved as a child, such as Knight Rider, He-Man, Smurfs, etc. But I don't think he really gets as much a platform for laughs here, since his story has the most emotional weight to bear. Probably my favorite character in this one was Nebula. I thought she was intriguing in the first film, but here we finally get to delve into her motivations and just exactly what it is she's after. Her love-hate relationship with Gamora takes the right amount of focus, and while she's still not at the level of being a hero, it's nice to see her tentative embrace of Gamora, despite being damaged, literally, both physically and emotionally. Rocket and Baby Groot don't really get the spotlight quite here as much as I would have liked. Rocket seems to be acting extremely difficult here, which leads to a decent payoff with Yondu, but he spends most of the film without interacting with the rest of the cast. He does have a great scene ambushing the Ravengers. As for Baby Groot, he too doesn't get quite enough to do, but he does get two extremely funny scenes, trying to break Yondu and Groot out of prison, and the entire bomb scene that was in the trailers. Drax also kinda gets pushed to the side. He doesn't quite get the chance to destroy here, but he gets off some pretty funny lines, mostly involving Mantis, whom he repeatedly insults as being ugly. Mantis, for her part, comes across pretty well. She's funny and somewhat endearing, but I really don't see her joining the team. I think she sort of served her purpose here, and I don't really know what else they could do with her. Yondu is the one who really steals the show here. In the first film, he kinda gave off the vibe of a guy with a gruff exterior, but was really a softie deep down. And in this one, they really delve deeply into his character and his relationship with Star-Lord. And it's a real emotional send-off to the character that really works well within the movie. Also have to comment on Stan Lee's cameo with the Watchers. That was really funny, and great that they can actually use the Watchers in the film. I guess this proves Stan isn't a Watcher, but he provides them vital info. The other end credit scenes were also very good and gave a bit of a glimpse at what to look forward to in Volume 3. Apparently Adam Warlock is in the mix. Sly Stallone will apparently be back with his band of Ravengers. The Teenage Groot one was very funny, so it appears he'll be full grown by the time of Infinity War. And props to James Gunn's brother Sean, who does a great job here. His practicing with Yondu's arrow in its eventual landing place was hilarious. So in conclusion, it's a bit of an uneven affair. It'll be interesting to see how well this film fares on the rewatch, but as of now, I'd have to say it's one of Marvel's lesser offerings. I'm giving Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 3.5 stars out of 5. This is Johnny Torch reminding you, I'm Mary Poppins, y'all! And I'll be with you again real soon.